So, I am going to discuss SML strategic management and leadership's subject, the past paper December 2021. So, I am Dimuthu Suranjana and fellow member of CA Sri Lanka, and so today probably by taking around 4 hours, I will try to discuss 2021 December paper with you. Here the objective is to explain the nature of the paper and what type of theories have been tested and how can you answer for the question raised in the paper. I will take a few seconds to discuss some of the key aspects in SML. So, one of the things that I have observed in SML subject is very low pass percentage. There are some contributory factors on this. One of the things is students' failure to understand the requirement, especially at a strategic level. So, this is strategic level paper. So, this is your last stage paper. So, examiner expect to have a in-depth analysis on the paper requirement. So, students have failed to address that particular requirement. On the other hand, what I have observed is from a student's point of view, they think this is very easy. They are not giving much attention on this subject compared with some of the other subject in the strategic level. So, therefore, they just think you have to just go through some PowerPoint slide and cover will say 30 to 40 hours right lectures, maybe online product, you just purchase online product, or you may follow this CA webinar series and you think, so PowerPoint slides is there, you can study those PowerPoint slides, so that is enough and you can go straight to the exam and write and pass it. So, that is one of the main I think misperception students have that has led for failures of the students. So, here actually as students I think you have to do in detail study, that is why you have been given a study text, right. You have to go for in depth studies. So, you must be a master in theory area, that is not sufficient. So, it is very important for you to write past paper questions and get the required in-depth analytical skills. Now, CA has done similar series for other past papers also. You can go through those past paper webinar series done by CA Sri Lanka and work with that and check what type of answers examiner has provided on the questions and try to develop that particular skills, right. So, otherwise this will be a nightmare for you surely, right. So, you want to allocate a lot of times on this. So, theory, so I personally think this is the most difficult subject in strategic level, right. So, because you have to study bulk in theory, plus you have to work with this past papers, you have to allocate a lot of time on that one and you have to develop your skills one by one. So, you have to have a very strong program that will monitor your performance, even if you can get a help of someone who is having a better knowledge than you, and if your performance is monitored, I think then I think it will be a some help for you, right. So, or work as a group or team and right, analyze the examiner answer. First of all, you can develop your own answers, then you can check what type of answer has developed by the examiner, compare your one with the examiner answer, then identify the problems within your answers, and so next time try to eliminate that particular weakness. So you should be monitored, right, by your own program, or someone else should have monitor your performance, and gradually you have to improve yourself, and then only you have to go to the exam and write it. So very low number of students pass this paper because of inherent weakness of the students, right. So you have to work very hard on this, otherwise right, definitely this will be one of the toughest papers you have ever done. So that experience, right, to avoid that type of experience, I think is very important for you to come up with a structural study programs, right. As you are aware that if you look at about the paper, this paper consists of two main areas, the part 1 or part A and the part B. Part A consists of two questions, right. So as you have told you, your paper consists of two main parts. This part A and part B. Part A and part B, if you look at about the part A, this consists of two questions, right. This consists of two questions, and each question carry 25 marks. This part B consists of one question. This is based on pre-scene. This is based on pre-scene, right. This is based on pre-scene, and it carry 50 marks. It carry 50 marks. So the nature of the paper also has complicated this paper to some extent. Why I am saying like that, or why I am giving such a statement, there are some contributor factors on that. Now, if you look at about this part A, see, this consists of two questions, each question carry 25 marks, each question carry 25 marks. So this is based on the whole theory area. Now if you look at about this area, to answer this area, right, you should have knowledgeable about the theory, plus you should have the application skills. For a given scenario, you should be able to apply it, right. Now the part B is based on pre-scene. Now see, this look like a two papers, right. Why? This you are aware on the requirement in pre-scene. You know that pre-scene is issued 1 month prior to the exam. Pre-scene is issued 1 month prior to the exam. 1 month prior to the exam. When pre-scene is issued 1 month prior to the exam, so what I advise for students is, you should have complete this part before 1 month of the exam, right. So what you have to do is here, right. So this whole theory plus the required this application skill should have been developed 1 month prior to the exam, right. Then, so within the last 1 month period, you have to work with this part B, you have to live with the pre-scene. So, openly what happened from students' point of view is most of them are actually doing self-study and no one is guiding them, and they have their own programs and they study without any proper program, and even last week also they still work with this part A requirement. They have not worked with the part B requirement. So, that ultimately lead for their own failures. So, this is very tough actually, tough examination requirement. So, that is why I made a statement earlier, this may be the most difficult paper in the strategic level, right. Why? Due to these requirements, right. So, the heavy theory content in the subject. So, you are aware that there are 15 chapters and all are theory, right. So, you have to memorize these things, right. It is not an easy task. For example, if you look at about the previous syllabus, it was around 60 to 65%. Compare with this SML subject, right. So, 60 to 65%. Now, it is a heavy content. So, as a students, you want to make sure you have studied all these heavy content, plus you have done the required applications knowledge, or you have developed the required application knowledge by working with these past traces and some other questions. So, it is a huge effort you need. This is not something you just go look at about PowerPoint slide, then cover will say 30 to 40 hours videos, then go for the exam, write it and pass it. So, that will never allow you to achieve the required success. It is not practical, guys. So, you have to work with this one at least for 6 months. So, minimum time period I am recommending for you to work with 6-month period at least, and it should be a very strong programs, right. So, I do not want to talk much on this since I need more time to discuss the paper. I just try to show you the importance of this XML paper and how can you work with this particular paper, right. So, what I will do is I will go and discuss the paper with you, right. So, I will try to discuss the paper with you. Right. So, we will back to the paper, right. So, first of all I will look at about the paper, right. So, I am going to look at about the paper. This is December 2021, December 2021. So, if you look at about the paper, this is 3 hour and 15-minute paper. This is not a 4-hour paper. So, actually 3-hour paper, additional 15 minutes are given for reading and planning purpose, right. The next thing, the important point is these are closed book examinations, and not a open book examinations. So, that make it little bit more difficult, right. So, why? As students, you have to remember all the theory area, right. So, all the theory area should be remember since this is a closed book examinations. Right. So, I have told you that there are two sections, section 1, section 2. Section 1 based on the theory you have learned, and 2 questions are covered within the section 1. Each question carry 25 marks. Section 2 is based on common pre-scene. Section 2 based on common pre-scene, and this carry 50 marks. This carry 50 marks, right. So, we will start our discussion from section 1, question number 1. Question number 1. So, this is 25 mark questions. This is 25 mark questions. Now, look at part A. Conduct a stakeholders positioning mapping using an appropriate model to assess the significance of the stakeholders of SHL and explain how to manage those stakeholders. So, part A of the question is based on stakeholders. Right, here the action verb given is conduct. So, we will try to identify the meaning of this conduct action verb. We will see what the meaning of conduct. That is given. It is not there, no? Right. Then you do not have to worry. Here, assess, you have to look at about the word assess then, right? Conduct is not there, no? So, within the questions, we will look at about this assess the significance of stakeholders, no? Therefore, we will look at about whether assess word is there. Yes. Look at this assess word. Here it say determine the value, nature, ability or quality. And determine the value, nature, ability or quality. Right. So, we will come back to the questions again. So, this is based on stakeholder mapping. And stakeholder mapping. So, if you remember what is stakeholder mapping, so I will try to explain this stakeholder mapping for you, right. So, first of all, right, we have to identify who is a stakeholder. So, who is a stakeholder? Stakeholder is any party who is having an interest about the business activities. So, stakeholder is normally having some sort of a interest about the business activities. So, there are so many stakeholders in a business. In other words, there are so many interested parties, about the business activities. For example, shareholders, employees, customers, government, general public, suppliers, they are example for stakeholders. The example for stakeholders. Now here the examiner has tested the question based on stakeholder mapping. Stakeholder mapping. So, what is stakeholder mapping? Under the stakeholder mapping, we are going to group stakeholders. So, we are going to group the stakeholders under the stakeholder mapping. To group the stakeholders, we normally use Mendelov matrix. So, here you can see the Mendelov matrix. The guy who introduced this one is the Mendelov. That's why we call this as a Mendelov matrix. In the Mendelov matrix, stakeholders are grouped into two. Stakeholders are grouped into two. Are grouped into four actually, based on two variables. What are those two variables? Level of interest and the power. Under each variable, we identify two options, low and high options. Within the level of interest, low, other one is high. Within the power, low and high options. Low and high options. So, when you try to combine them, we can identify four groups: level of interest low, power low; level of interest high, power low; level of interest low, power high; level of interest high, power high. So, four group can be found. Each group we can categorize as category A, B, C and D. Actually, if you look at about this stakeholder mapping, two things we are trying to do. The first thing is the categorization of stakeholders. categorization of stakeholders. Other one is identification of strategies to map each stakeholder. First thing is to identify the stakeholder group. Second one is to identify the appropriate strategies to deal with each group. Now, first of all, I explain that particular requirement, categorization of stakeholders. Right. What are the common examples for each group? For an example, category A, what are the examples? So, category A mean level of interest low, power is also low. For example, general public. Under the normal circumstances, look at the word I have used, normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, interest of general public on organizational activity may be low, at the same time power is also low. Then category B, level of interest is high, but the power is low. For an example, individual employee, if you look at about one particular employee, their interest is very high about the business activities. What is the reason for high interest? The reason for high interest is because they depend on the business. Therefore, their interest is very high. But most of the employees' power is very low, and power is very low. Category C, that means interest is low, power is high. For example, government. Normally, government interest on business activities is low, unless there is a special situations occur. Category D, normally we call category D as key player. Their level of interest is high, at the same time power is also high. Level of interest high, power is also high. For an example, main shareholder of a business, right. Here the second part of the application of stakeholder mapping is the identification of strategies. Identification of strategies to deal with each stakeholder party. If you look at about category A, normally we do not want to put much effort in managing them. Since they are not much interested about the business activities and power is also low, normally we have to put a minimal effort in managing them. Then category B is different from them. Since their level of interest is high, even though their power is low, the best strategy of managing them is to inform whatever organizations do. So, whenever we take important decisions, better to inform those decisions to this particular stakeholder group. Category C, level of interest is low, power is high. This group should be carefully managed. Why? We have to manage this group with care. At any time, they can increase their interest and can move to the category D and can become a key player. Therefore, we have to be careful in managing this category C group. We have to be careful in managing category C group. What we have to do is, we have to satisfy the requirement of the category C, that is the ideal strategy on them. Then category D, since they are the most important stakeholder group of an organization, the most appropriate strategy is to accept whatever we do. In other words, we have to get the approval from this category D stakeholder group whenever we take some important decisions. Right. This is the theory aspects. All right. So, part A has been tested based on the stakeholder mapping. If we go through again on this, look at the questions. Conduct a stakeholder positioning mapping using an appropriate model to assess the significance of the stakeholders of SHL and explain how to manage those stakeholders. The first part is based on the categorization of stakeholders. Second part, explain how to manage those stakeholders. That depend on that 4 strategies we have discussed. Right. So, first of all, we will go through the scenario given and try to understand the questions given. With the para number 1, Apex International is one of the largest group of companies in Sri Lanka. Apex International PLC is the holding company of AI Group, and it has made its presence in the hotel and resort, healthcare, logistic, information technology and FMCG sectors in Sri Lanka through separate legal entities in accordance with the holding company structure. Now, look at that introductory sentence given. So, APEC International is one of largest group of companies in Sri Lanka. It is a large group. Look at the second sentence given. Apex International PLC is the holding company of AI Group. So, I think examiner want to talk about some company of AI Group. This Apex is the holding company, right? It is the holding company of AI Group, and it has made its presence in, now they explain the sectors operated by AI Group. Hotels and resort is one sector, healthcare, logistic, information technology and FMCG, fast moving consumer goods. In Sri Lanka through separate legal entities encoded with the holding company structure. That means separate legal entities mean we may have established separate companies and registered them under Company Act. Right? He has mentioned about holding company structure. So, probably there may be questions to test your knowledge on this holding company structure, right. That is why he has given that particular name here. In general, approximately 50% of group revenue was generated from the hotels and resort sector. So, that particular sentence indicates the number one company in the group is hotels and resort sector. Actually, the important sector is the hotels and resort sector. However, this revenue has drastically dropped during the last 3 years. That is something to be considered. I think it is natural with this COVID-19 pandemic situation. Suvajiva Hospital Private Limited is the healthcare arm of a group. Suvajiva Hospital Private Limited is the healthcare arm of a group. Now, so look at this scenario. So, we started with Apex International. Then we go to the AI, Apex, AI, now Suvajiva Hospital Private Limited. That is a company come under the AI group, right. Is the healthcare arm of AI group. Now, question is given for what? SHL. So, question test your knowledge on SHL, that is Suvajiva Hospital Private Limited. Suvajiva Hospital Private Limited is the healthcare arm of AI group. SHL was established in 1990 by the late Swarna Bandara, and it was acquired by API in 2005. The majority of the board of directors of SHL is represented by members nominated by API. Majority of the board of directors of SHL is represented by members nominated by API, right. Providing safe, secure and high quality healthcare services through professional staff is the prime objective of SHL. Gradually, SHL became the cash cow of AI group. So, you should have a knowledge on what is cash cow. Cash cow mean a business unit which is in the mature stage. They enjoy higher market share, but low industry growth rate, right, and normally they have positive cash flows. Excess cash are generated by cash cow, right. SHL became the cash cow of AI group and established a chain of hospital across the western province. Establish a chain of hospital across the western province. So, they have so many hospital. The hospital chain has more than 600 bed and employ around 1,200 staff members. In 2014, SHL was awarded the ISO 9001 2008 certification. All the hospitals within the chain rigorously maintain continuous compliance with international recognized standard on providing a safe and effective patient care. SL is well known for using cutting-edge medical equipment and technology in the industry. It is also one of the most accredited hospital in the Sri Lankan healthcare sector. Right. Dr. Jeeva Bandara became the Chief Executive Officer CEO of SHL in early July 2020. Now, sooner he became the CEO, he tabled a board paper to expand the hospital network outside the Western Province. Now, they are operating in Western Province and proposal came to go outside the Western Province. However, this expansion project is now at a standstill. That means no progress, no. Now at a standstill due to the prevailing global pandemic. Dr. Jeeva resubmit the board paper in the backdrop of new normality. With the lifting of the lockdown in September 2021. For the board paper, it was proposed, as per the board paper, it was proposed to build 2 new hospitals in the Ratnapura and Kurunegala district as the 11th and 12th hospital in the chain. Two contrasting districts, no? Ratnapura and Kurunegala, 11th and 12th hospital in the chain respectively. If this project is undertaken, it will add an additional 200 bed to the hospital chain. Add an additional 200 bed in the to the hospital chain. The project proposal was discussed at length at the recently concluded board meeting. Right. Sudeva, one of the directors appointed by API, is highly concerned on the above proposal. 650 million investment, although the project business case show a net present value of 2 billion with an internal rate of return of 35% for a 20-year project period. This project is having 2 billion NP value and IRR 35%, but one of the directors is concerned on this. Is the opinion that some of the revenue assumptions are very vague, not clear, and a few important operating expenses are not included in the business case. Therefore, the Chief Financial Officer of SHL was assigned to revisit the business case. Chief Financial Officer of SHL was assigned to revisit the business case, and the decision was deferred to the next board meeting. Furthermore, the Chief Marketing Officer was entrusted to review the stakeholder view on the above project and table a report at the next board meeting. The SHL board also advised Dr. Jeeva to give more weightage to the stakeholder view before committing to project of this magnitude. Right. Now, what is the first requirement? Conduct a stakeholder positioning mapping using an appropriate model to assess the significance of the stakeholders of SHL. Right. First of all, you want to identify the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Right. Who are the stakeholders according to this scenario given? So, we will look at the stakeholders. Now, if you look at about this scenario given, Apex International is at the top. Here Apex International is at the top, Apex. Then we can find AI Group. then we can see AI group. Under the AI group, you can identify SHL. So, SHL is part of the AI group. SHL is part of AI group. Now, here, so definitely Apex International should be interested on this, and AI group should be interested on this. Yeah. Then board of directors of SHL may be interested on this, right. So, from the nature of the structure itself, you can identify so many stakeholder parties. Then right. So, we will look at para 2 also to identify more stakeholder parties. Right. Look at second para, this are there any party we can identify? Board of directors, SHL, yes, that should be one of the stakeholder group. Then any other, so staff members, employees should be an important stakeholder group. Employees, patients, very important, customers in other words. Then there may be some suppliers, for example, doctors, then there may be some doctors associations like this government medical officers associations, GMOA, right. Then there may be some drug suppliers, then general public, government. So, we can identify so many stakeholders in relation to this, right. So, we will try to identify their interest also, right, and their power also, right. We identify a few stakeholder group in relation to this. Normal stakeholder group like employees, then we identify board of directors, then we identify that holding company, then customers mean patients, Then we identify suppliers, then we identify doctors, very important parties. Then we identify government, general public, GMO, Government Medical Officers Associations. The suppliers, there may be different suppliers. For example, here we take we will say medical or pharmaceutical companies, right. So, that is the first things we have done. So, if you go for mini level, micro level, there may be more stakeholder parties can be identified. Even we will say media, right. Then the next thing is put them into Mendelov matrix. Put them into Mendelov matrix. Here interest, low, high, then power, low, high. So, put these people into that A, B, C, D group, right. Now, remember majority, your answer, my answer and the examiner, majority should come up with a one accessible stakeholder categorizations, but still there may be slight differences, small percentage slight differences in my answer, your answer and the examiner answer, because that depends on the judgment and based on the argument. If you have a valid argument, valid point, then your answer is correct. For example, you say I am saying this is C, a particular stakeholder will say C, but you say D, but you have a valid argument. If so, then your point is correct, right. If I am going to look at about the stakeholder group I have identified, right. Here I have identified 10 stakeholder group. Holding company, I will put them under D. Employees, B. Board of directors, D. We can take this management also separately, management, higher management, say D, management, D. Customers, normally customer interest is high, but individual customer power is normally low, right. Normally low, therefore, I will put under B. Suppliers, I will say small supply may be B, a small supplier B, right. Doctors, Possibly the key doctors may be D, but you may argue they as B. It depends on your argument. You will say there are some MBBS doctors, but not much important. Then that scenario they can be categorized under B. But if it is a specialist doctor, your patients are attracted because of these doctors. In that scenario, D, right? Then the government C, government C. Right. Then general public, maybe low interest, say A. GMO A, possibly C, power is high, not much interested. In a specific situation, they may increase their power and become D, right. Then media may be A. So, I have categorized stakeholders based on particular arguments, right. So, here GMOA I assume their interest is low, power is high, but if something happened to their members and that particular scenario, they may be D. If you still think no, they are much interested, then you can categorize them under group D, right. Right. This is based on my argument. I did the classifications, right. Then the part B require, you want require to identify to manage these stakeholder parties, appropriate strategies to manage these stakeholder parties. So, how can we manage these stakeholder parties? If we look at about group A, their interest is low, then the power is also low. Here, normally we want to put a minimal effort, no need to put much effort, right, minimal effort. Then B, you have to inform, whatever you do, you have to inform it to them. C, you have to satisfy their requirement. D, accept, they should accept, right. So, if we holding company, for example, D, we identify them as key players, important stakeholder parties. So, whatever you do should be acceptable to them. Or in other words, you have to get the approval from them when you are implementing important decisions. If they are not going to accept it, or in other words approve it, it is not practical for us to proceed with that particular decisions. We have to not implement that decision if it is not accepted by these key players, right. Then board of directors, management, doctors, so all come under that key player category. What we have to do is, we should not proceed anything if these people are not going to accept it. Then C, the parties like government, GMOA, so they are also very important party. So, we have to treat them with care, since at any time they may move to D by increasing their interest. Therefore, we have to satisfy their requirement. Then parties like B, employees, right. Then suppliers, small suppliers, right. So, whenever we do important things, better to inform that. So, it is better for us to inform it to them. Then A, group like general public, media, So, we do not want to put much effort, minimum effort should be put to managing them, right. Right. I hope it is clear for you, this part A. So, we will see examiner's answer also in very brief. This also may be more descriptive than my one. Now, look at the number of parties here assigned by so many parties. APEC International PLC, that is holding company, shareholders of API, shareholders of SHL, director of SHL, top management SHL, customers SHL, employees SHL, consultant physician SHL, pharmaceutical firms, drug suppliers SHL, medical equipment suppliers. See, these suppliers here assigned by many group actually. Pharmaceutical firms, drug suppliers, medical equipment suppliers, 3 suppliers. I identify one and then I provide example. AI nominated directors, business partners, is additional one. Bank and financial institutions, yes, I think I can also identify that party. Associations such as GMOA, I identify that one. General public, regulators and government authorities, right. So, similar answer, but the supplier side actually additionally he has identified 3 parties. Then I miss out one, that bank and financial institutions, right. Right. Then he has put them into that Mendelov metric. I have done that one, right. Then explain these 4 strategies, right. Now you can see the explanations. The key players, they have high level of interest in what SHL does and high level of influence power. AIPS is a holding company, SHL shareholders, SHL board of directors are example of key players. Then he provides the example, right. So, look at the way that examiner has developed the answer. First of all, tell who is a key player, interest high, then power is high, then example are provided, right. Then he talk about the strategy. The CEO of SHL should take the view of these key holders into very careful consideration when making decision. So, you have to consider their views, and actually they should approve this. That is why we say accept, right. Then keep satisfied. These stakeholders have a low level of interest in SHL operation, but a potential large amount of influence and power should they ever wish to use it. You explain that one, interest low, then power high. Then see, stakeholders in this segment must be treated with care. Must be treated with care. I also mentioned the same point. Why? At any time they can move to the segment D by increasing their interest. So, examiner has not mentioned that point, you can mention that point here. They should therefore be kept satisfied, then example are provided, right. Shareholders of AI PLC, government institutes such as Ministry of Health, right, government is mainly, right. Kept informed. These stakeholders do not have great ability to improve strategy, although their level of interest is high. So, first introductory sentence talk about interest level and the power level. Power is low, that is why they do not have much ability to influence. Interest is high and their view is important. They can also increase their power by lobbying. For example, employee can increase their power by forming union. They should therefore be kept informed, right. As indicated above, SHL consultant. Now here see this SHL consultant have been identified under employee category, right. It based on argument. Pharmaceutical firm, the suppliers, major vendors, bank, identify under that particular category. Minimum effort. These stakeholders have a low level of interest in SHL operation and low amount of influence, low interest, low power. Management does not have to give much or even any consideration stakeholder in this group. Customers, see he say customers are under that group, but I identify under B group. It's based on argument. GMO he has identified under this group, but I identify even in the D, right, or C probably, right. It is depend on your argument, right. Okay, right. Then we'll move to part B of the questions. So, evaluate the proposed hospital expansion project using the SAFE, suitability, accessibility and feasibility model. Now, we will look at about this hospital expansion model. So, we are planning to establish 2 hospitals, no? One in Ratnapura, other one in Kunnagala, right. Now, he is asking us to evaluate that particular proposal using the SAFE model. The suitability, acceptability and feasibility model, right. So, if we look at about the theory aspects on this, so normally, so we know about the process. We know about the process. Right. So, if you look at about this strategy making process, so we know that formulation of strategies formulation of strategies. So, we are looking about this formulation of strategy part here. In there actually there are two options. The first option is identification of strategies. Identification of strategies. Identification of strategies. Identification of strategies. Then the second part is evaluation of strategies. Evaluation of strategies. These are the two parts, no? Right. Formulations under the formulation of strategies, there are two parts: identification of strategies, then the evaluation of strategies. Now, here they have identified a strategy. What is the strategy they have identified is to establish two hospitals. They want to establish two hospitals. One in Ratnapura, other one in Kurunegala. The next thing is we want to evaluate this particular proposal and want to make a decision whether it is feasible to go with the proposed decision or not. To do that, we have to evaluate this. Normally, on your syllabus, to evaluate a particular proposal, two model have been suggested. One is 7S model, right. Other one is SAF model. SAF model. Now, if you look at about this particular questions, it tests your knowledge on the SAF model. SAF model, right? Right. So, we look at about this part, this SAF model. If you look at about the SAF model, SAF. So, here we try to identify three tests. The first one is suitability test. Suitability test. Suitability test. So, after you have completed the suitability test, then you move to the next test. They are taking place in sequential order actually. The second test is acceptability test. Acceptability test. Then the third one is feasibility test. This is feasibility test. Feasibility test. So, after acceptability test, then we move to the feasibility test. Right. Now, this if you look at about this suitability test, this is the first test normally we are going to perform. Suitability test. If this test passed, only then we move to the accessibility test. If accessibility test pass, then only we move to the feasibility test, right. Suitability test, if you look at about suitability test, this looking about the logic of the strategy, mainly it look at about sort factors, that is one, it look at sort factors, right. In addition to sort, it look at about objectives, then it look at about the risks, whether it can provide a competitive advantage, right. These are mainly covered under the suitability test, right. Right. Then if you look at about the accessibility test, here it mainly focus on the stakeholder aspects, it look at about stakeholders, whether this project is accessible to the stakeholders, the main stakeholder parties are concerned. In the feasibility test, it look at about the practicality of implementing the strategy, whether it is practicable to implement the strategies considered under the feasibility test, right. So, these are the three main tests to be carried out. If you look at about this, you can see suitability related to the logic of the strategy and how it fit it with the organization objectives, resources and competences and strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threat. See, this is sort factors, these sort factors, right. Sort factors, this is sort, right, sort factors. Then accessibility, this is connected with the stakeholders. Feasibility, it must be practicable, and capable of implementations. So, this questions is based on this particular theory, right. So, we will look at about the applications part of this also. Right. Evaluate the proposed hospital expansion project using the SAP model. Now, you have a sound knowledge about the SAP model. Now, if you look at about the questions, now suitability we have look at about the sort factors, no. Yes, sort factors, the objective. Now, objective is to get a acceptable return, Here the return expected NP value is 2 billion and IRR is 35%. Then what are the strength of this? Example for strength. Owned by a large group of companies should be a strength, right. Then experienced company, because this company was established in 1990, it is more than 30 years in the industry, right. Then anything else? It's a cash cow, mean they have a positive cash flow strength. Then have chain of hospital up to the Western Province strength, and they have been avoided this ISO 9001 2008 certifications. Strength, quality aspect is strong. Then well known for using cutting edge medical equipment and technology in the industry. Strength again, and it is also one of the most accredited hospital in Sri Lankan healthcare academy. Strength, right. Any weaknesses? Possibly this not easy to run a hospital. For example, maybe the doctor's bargaining power may be very high, should be a weakness. Opportunity, yes, there are opportunities, because right, lot of demand for medical facilities, there should be opportunity, especially in these two district, maybe less number of hospital. Threat, there may be some compared to hospital in the area. Then what about this current economic situation? So always create a problem, that may be a threats, right. Shall we look at about what the examiner tell on this? Look at the answer. Evaluation of the hospital expansion project SAF model. When it comes to evaluating a strategy for a business, it can often be difficult to select the right strategy. Therefore, it is important to decide on a criterion by which to assess option, and a useful approach is to consider suitability, accessibility and feasibility of each one. Those were introduced by Johnson, Scholas and Washington in that strategic management book of them, exploring strategy, exploring corporate strategy book. Suitability, the first para talk about this the theory part, right. Then SAF objectives, healthcare arm of Apex International PLCs, which has created a chain of hospitals in the Western Province. As of now, it's a lone 10 hospital located in the providing safe, secure and high quality medical care service provision staff is the prime objective of SHL. Extract from the question itself, no. Therefore, expanding the healthcare business is well within SHL prime objectives. It is given, no. So, we check whether it is matched with their hospital, their objective. It is given their objective. The objective is providing safe, secure and high quality healthcare service through professional staff, right. Providing safe, secure and high quality healthcare service through professional staff. So, when you look at about the expansion is in line with that. Organize resources for the scenario, all hospital within the chain rigorously maintain continuous compliance with international recognized standard providing safe and effective patient care. Further, they are adept at using most of the cutting edge medical equipment technology in the industry. They have that particular resources. No, it was also stated that SHL was awarded the ISO certification. Therefore, SHL is presumed to be equipment with the all related resources, as SHL is considered as the cash cow PI group. We presume that the company has maintained positive cash flow. They have the required cash flows. The sort have been done. Look at the strength identified, backed by holding company. They have 30 years experience in industry. They are recognized as high quality healthcare service with ICSO certifications. One of most accredited hospital in the Sri Lanka healthcare sector. Positive cash flow, strength. Weakness. Healthcare industry is a highly regulatory industry. I don't think it's a weakness. It should be a threat actually, right? Second one, high bargaining power of consultant physicians. Yes, that should be a problem we are facing. Does not have sound relationship with stakeholders. Maybe there may be issues. High risk due to nature of patient care healthcare industry. Undue influence of nominated board members of the holding company. Yes, that can happen. That should be a weakness. So, examiner has identified few weaknesses. Opportunities. Continued lack of medical funding and healthcare infrastructure in Sri Lanka's public sector. Continued lack of medical funding and healthcare infrastructure in Sri Lankan public sector. Opportunity. Private healthcare provider in Sri Lanka will continue to expand their presence in the market. Due to prevailing global pandemic, there is a rise in demand for healthcare service throughout the country. Opportunity. Threat. Strong capabilities of the main competitors in the healthcare market and their backup. There may be a lot of competitors. Then there may be issue in the Ratnapura and Punnagar district also. They may not have the capability, and since most of people are poor people. Sustainable competitive advantage. Yes, so it will allow us to go beyond the Western province, and the geographical risk is reduced. Right. Accessibility. Now we know accessibility connect with the main stakeholders. It means stakeholders. These are the main stakeholders. Normally you can identify. Shareholders, customers, management, staff, government and regulators, general public. So, we have to check whether the proposed strategy is accessible to them. Now, shareholders, that holding company shareholders, whether this is accessible to them, whether it will provide a accessible return for them. For example, I think the 2 billion NPV value, we have to check whether that is a true figure. Customers, this area, the Kurunagala and Ratnapura, whether customers are happy on this strategy. Even the existing customers in the Western province, and whether they accept this one, whether their service quality will not be reduced as a result of this one. Management, whether CEO is proposing this one, no? Whether these other members are accepting that one. With the staff members, whether they are ready to accept this one, whether government is accepting this one, no breach of laws, whether the general public will accept this one. Right. We will check what the examiner say on this. He has identified board of directors, shareholders, top management, employees of SHL. The accessibility aspect of the SF model is all about measuring the return risk and shareholder reaction resulting from a particular strategy. Return will be measured based on the benefit the stakeholders expect from the strategy and could be financial as well as non-financial depending on what the stakeholders decide. That introductory para. Look at about board of directors. All the directors have concern over the viability project. Yes, one director is having concern now. The revised business case come up with a positive figure after adjusting for the missing of X factors and assumption. They may take a favorable stance in relation to the expansion project. As there is a continuous decline in considered revenue from the hospitality sector, A group should welcome other diversified business opportunities. Yes. Now see, you have to be careful on this. Now, if you look at about the questions paper, now here this see this Sudeva, one of the directors appointed by API, is highly concerned on the above proposed 650 million investment, although the project business case show a net present value of 2 billion. Now see, now according to the current feasibility study done by them, NPE value is 2 billion and IRR is 35%. He is the opinion that some of the revenue assumptions are very weak and few important operating expenses are not included in the business case. Now see, now to assess this board of directors, you have to come up with a revised plan. You have to incorporate some of the operating expenses which are not included, and assumption should be changed. You have to come up with a new feasibility study, right. Therefore, the chief financial officer of SGL was assigned to revisit the business case and the decision was deferred to the next board meeting. So, with this new plan, if it is positive cash flow after incorporating all these expenses, then only this is acceptable, right. So, it is clearly given here. Then shareholders of SHL, shareholders will have expectation about the return they receive on their investment in terms of the probability, dividend, share price growth and so on. Taken as a whole, the business case provided NPV of 2 billion with a IR of 35% for the 20-year project period. Therefore, the overall return may be acceptable to shareholders of SHL. And again, you can write that one additional sentence after the revised plan also it should be a positive NPV and a good IRR, right. Then SHL top management, the expansion proposal was put forward by the company CEO Dr. Jeeva Bandara. It is presumed that key management personnel will accept the proposed strategy and try to implement it effectively. The expansion proposal was put forward by the company CEO Dr. Jeeva Bandara. It is presumed that key management personnel will accept the proposed strategy and try to implement it effectively. Yes, general statement has been given. Employees of SHL, employee may have to be committed to the study for it is to be successful. If employees are happy with the strategy, they will cooperate with the management to support the implementation. As this expansion project will lead to the large scale job creation, employee may welcome the expansion project proposal. Yes, nothing bad happen to them, no. They will not lose jobs and new opportunity will be created, right. Even you will see, for example, you see someone in the Ratnapura now in the boarding house in Colombo. If the new one is established, then he can go to this Ratnapura and will be very happy on that one, right. In terms of the risk, the probability of strategy failure and any financial losses, brand or corporate impact should also be considered. Risk can be measured by the impact on liquidity, sensitive analysis and stakeholder reactions in order to deem how acceptable a strategy is. As the business case and IRR provide a positive picture, it is presumed that there is a probability of high return with manageable risk. So, risk should be acceptable, that is another factor now. Risk is one of the factor you have to consider, right. Then feasibility aspects. under theory part, so normally what are the issues to be considered? One is whether we have enough resources to implement the strategy. Right. For example, the cash flows, right. I think they must have enough cash because they are in the cash cow portions, that means mature business unit, and it should generate more cash flows. Positive cash flow should be available. Ability, does the organization have the ability, skill, experience, competence and appropriate culture to implement the strategy successfully? Yes, they are ISO certified hospital, and they have very good name in the industry. So, they may have the required ability. Then competitor response, will the organization be able to deal with any respond to the strategy by major competitors? Any response strategy by major competitors? I think they may have the particular skill, right, time, whether they have enough time to implement the strategy. These are theory aspects. The sustainability, whether it will provide a long term competitive advantage to the organizations, right. So, we will look at about what the examiner say on this feasibility aspect. When it comes down to it, the feasibility portion of the SAP model is really the make or break of any chosen strategy. The key to the success of the strategy is whether or not the business has the resource, aptitude, ability to implement the strategy. Therefore, financial feasibility need to be assessed by forecasting, analyzing cash flows, performing a break-even analysis, and several other financial tests. According to finding of these, the proposed expansion strategy must be feasible. In other words, it must be practicable and capable implementation. This is theory part now. It explains theory aspect. All the NP and IR provide positive rosy picture. It is also considered associated qualitative factors also. Now, look at these factors they have considered. Resources. Does SHL have the resources, technology and equipment, skill, staff, material to implement the strategy? Since SHL is considered as a cash cow, see I have mentioned the same point, cash cow of the group, financial ability will be guaranteed. Also, for the given scenario, SHL is adept at using most of the cutting edge medical equipment technology in the industry. They have the required technology. Ability, does SHL have the ability, skill, experience, competence and appropriate culture to implement the strategy successfully? At present, SHL successfully operate and manage 10 hospitals in the Western Province. Because it is presumed that SHL has the ability to operate and manage per the hospital in its hospital chain. Then competitor response. Will SHL be able to deal with any response to the strategy by major competitors? For the given scenario, SHL is very successful in the Western Province, thus its presence outside the Western Province will be welcomed by regional competitors. Also, it should be noted that there is a huge vacuum in the private healthcare market in Sri Lanka as the public health sector is predominant. Cost and other related expenditure. Although SHL has the required financial ability and infrastructure, there are many other costs that may not be captured when preparing the business case. It is natural that all associated costs cannot be captured in the business case. It's a practical scenario, not easy to capture all the related expenses. Time constraint, constructing hospital building, recruiting and selecting regional staff, developing competencies, leading the employees to embrace the new culture and obtaining approval from the provincial government authorities will all take considerable time. As for the project period is 28, it is important to compute the payback period. It may take some time to get all these approval and get the required resources. Once the SHL has gone through each area of the SAF model, it must decide which criteria and idea are important, thereby consider above facts. When developing a competitive advantage, SHL must reconsider proposed expansion strategy under the above SAF categories, analyze the competitive advantages of the provincial main players of the two districts and the need of the key stakeholders. SHL can use the strength experience it has gained over the period of 30 years in the healthcare industry and seize market expansion opportunities. The expansion strategy that fit each of the suitability, accessibility and feasibility criteria that SHL management has chosen as base is ultimately the most favorable choice of strategy for the business. Right. So, we have completed part B. What is part C? Look at part C. The holding company structure is considered an extreme form of divisionalizations. The holding company structure is considered an extreme form of divisionalization. Outline the advantages that may be enjoyed by SHL as a result of the holding company structure. Outline, what is the meaning of outline? Look at about the outline. Make a summary of significant features, right. So, make a summary of significant features, right. Advantage of a holding structure. This is actually theory. Why I am saying this is theory? Right, I will show you theory part to you. Here see, there are 4 points given. Divisionalization has some advantages, despite the problem identified previously. So, there are 4 points given. What are the advantage of divisionalizations? A, it focuses the attention of subordinate management on business performance and result. I try to focus on individual business performance separately. Managed by objectives, natural control default. It gives more authority to junior managers and therefore provide them with work that groom them for more senior position in the future. Help to groom these junior managers. It provide an organization structure which reduce the number of levels of management. The top executive in each division should be able to report directly to chief executive of the holding company. Reduce the number of levels with management. We will see whether he has given the same answers. See, same answers I have been given. 100% theory, pure theory. So what are the points you can take? Now, if you have not studied this part, if you have not studied these 4 points, will you be able to get this 5 marks? So, if you have not done the study properly, you will not be able to get these 5 marks. That is why I emphasize at the beginning, you want to have a thorough understanding of each theory area in the study text. For that purpose, you should have done a detailed study. That is why this become more tougher, this paper become more tougher, right. So, with that we can complete the question number 1.